The boardroom felt cavernous as the last of the investors settled into their high-backed leather chairs. Jonathan Mercer stood at the head of the table, every muscle in his body coiled tight with nerves. The scent of polished wood and expensive. Coffee beans hung in the air, but it did nothing to calm the frantic pounding of his heart. He cleared his throat, glanced at the empty seat beside him, and reminded himself that the interpreter, his guarantee of clear communication, was running 15 minutes behind schedule. He could feel the critical gazes of the dozen or so potential partners drilled into him. Each wore an expression that said, in a dozen unspoken ways, you had one chance to prove yourself. His palms slicked with sweat. He'd prepared every slide, rehearsed every phrase in accented Mandarin, only to realize moments before the meeting that without a translator, none of it mattered. From the back of the room, Angela Wright watched him struggle. She recognized the tension in his posture. She'd seen it so many nights before, sweeping these very floors in her work uniform. A daughter of the building's night janitor, she knew the echoes of silence here better than anyone. The way footsteps bounced over marble, the faint hum of the ventilation, the distant click of heels in the hallway. She knew the faces of each investor, studied the way they tapped their pens, leaned back or forward. When Mercer's voice cracked on a simple greeting, the investors exchanged glances. Several murmured in Mandarin. One tapped his silver pen against the table. Time stretched taut between heartbeat and heartbeat. Angela closed her eyes and made a decision. She rose, removed her rubber gloves, and strode forward in her plain black. Pumps. She cleared her throat, loud enough to snag attention. Head swiveled. For a moment, the room paused. A silence so complete it hummed. Then she spoke in English. Good morning. I am Angela Wright, and I will be your interpreter today. Mercer's binder slipped from his trembling fingers. Investors sat stunned. A lanky young woman in a tidy blouse and slacks. The lead investor, a venerable man with silver hair and a trimmed goatee, opened his mouth. This is entirely unexpected. Angela dipped her head. I understand, sir. May I begin? The room was riveted. Mercer looked as though he might faint, but the invisible thread of urgency pulled him to his seat. He gestured to the projector screen. Angela took a seat beside him, produced a small leather-bound notebook and pen. Mercer swallowed and began. Unity Tech's secure data protocol increases efficiency by 40%, while reducing server load by 20%. He glanced at Angela. She translated into Mandarin flawlessly, each technical term precise, each nuance conveyed with clarity. The investors leaned forward. One raised an eyebrow. Another tapped his chin. Angela returned to English, relaying their question about integration with existing cloud systems. Mercer answered. Angela translated. The room shifted from skepticism to guarded interest. By the time she finished interpreting his closing remarks, she'd transformed his panic into confidence. The lead investor tapped the table at the back of his hand. Remarkable. Your translations were flawless, and your presence kept us focused. We would like to move forward with a memorandum of understanding. Mercer blinked. Relief flooded his face. He offered Angela a stiff nod of gratitude. She returned a small smile, then addressed the investors in Mandarin, confirming next steps, timelines, points of contact. As the chairs scraped back and handshakes were exchanged, Jonathan Mercer stepped aside, pulled Angela close, and whispered, You saved this company millions today. Angela shook her head. I only did what needed to be done. But Mercer knew better. Rumors of the janitor's daughter had already begun to spread through the building. By the end of the day, every receptionist, security guard, and IT specialist had heard the story. Angela's father, still sweeping beneath the ficus trees, looked up in surprise when his daughter emerged from the elevator dressed in business attire. Over steaming cups of cardamom tea in the lobby kiosk, Mercer offered Angela the position he had just created, Director of International Relations. The salary, the title, the office overlooking the city skyline, everything she never dreamed was possible. Angela accepted, thinking of her father's weary smile, the countless nights she had studied Mandarin textbooks under dim bulb light. After closing the building, her first tasks were daunting. Build a translation team, draft expansion proposals, establish local partnerships across Asia, Latin America, Europe. She repurposed a dusty supply closet into her office, pinned world maps on the walls, and labeled sticky notes with city names and market data. By week's end, her proposal for a phased rollout to Singapore, São Paulo, and Berlin was ready for review by the board. On Monday morning, she stood before the executive suite, familiar faces, now tinged with doubt, their skepticism palpable. She opened her presentation. Market intelligence, risk assessments, projected revenues. When the CFO questioned her optimistic projections, she calmly presented results from the Singapore pilot user engagement metrics, client testimonials, regulatory compliance approvals. When the coup asked about data privacy in Europe, she detailed her collaboration with Berlin-based legal experts to ensure full GDPR adherence. 2 hours later, the board voted unanimously to greenlight her plan. Applause filled the room. Angela allowed herself a momentary grin before diving back into logistics, hiring interpreters, securing contracts with telecom carriers, localizing user interfaces for right-to-left scripts in the Middle East. Over the next 8 months, under Angela's leadership, Unity Tech launched in Tokyo with a gala she hosted entirely in Japanese, complete with ceremonial origami gifts. In Mumbai, she negotiated partnerships enabling bundled offerings through telecom providers. In Mexico City, she oversaw Spanish translation of marketing collateral, consulted with local influencers to tailor messaging. In Dubai, she navigated payment gateways and legal frameworks, personally attending regulatory meetings. Her successes multiplied. Unity Tech's stock price rose steadily. International revenues accounted for nearly 50% of total earnings. Business magazines featured her story, from janitor's daughter to executive, the woman who bridged cultures and languages. She sat on industry panels, sharing insights on cross-cultural communication. She mentored young professionals, many of whom came from service industry backgrounds, offering scholarships in her father's name. Yet she never forgot the janitor's closet where she once worked. Each month, she rode the service elevator to the lobby, greeted the cleaning crew, set aside time to chat with security guards. She instituted Open Door Fridays, where any employee, regardless of rank, could pitch ideas. She allocated budget to upgrade rest areas for support staff. She made sure that every floor had bilingual signage and that every memo had translations available. Jonathan Mercer became one of her greatest allies. He often consulted her on customer calls and publicly credited her in shareholder meetings. At the company retreat, he toasted her contributions. Angela reminds us that talent can come from anywhere, and that empathy and communication are the most powerful tools we possess. By the time Unity Tech prepared for its initial public offering, Angela's role was cemented. She earned a seat on the board, negotiated equity vesting for support staff employees, and continued to expand her division into new regions: Africa, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe. She traveled constantly, each flight another opportunity to hone her skills, understand new markets, and forge personal connections. Through it all, her father remained her anchor. He minced no words when she missed family dinners, chiding her gently over the phone. "All that success, but you forgot to eat." He attended her speaking engagements in Karachi, beaming as journalists called her the bridge between worlds. At her insistence, he retired from his janitorial role with full pension and a position leading the Unity Tech Workforce Well-Being Council, advising the company on how best to support its service employees. The years blurred into a tapestry of milestones, new offices, record revenues, industry awards. But the memory of that one tense morning never faded. Whenever Angela encountered a crisis, a delayed shipment, a regulatory hurdle, a high-stakes negotiation, she recalled the echoing silence of the boardroom, the blank seat beside her, and how stepping forward changed everything. At her retirement ceremony a decade later, Mercer presented her with a ceremonial plaque shaped like a bridge, engraved, "To Angela Wright, who showed us that barriers are only opportunities in disguise." In the lobby, her father's old broom was displayed in a glass case, a reminder that humble beginnings can sweep the path to greatness. Angela stepped to the podium one last time. She looked out at the sea of faces: board members, international partners, former investors, and the building staff who had witnessed her rise. She raised her glass. "Thank you for believing in me. Remember that every voice matters, and that sometimes all it takes is the courage to step into the silence and speak." Applause thundered through the hall as she lowered her glass. In that moment, Angela Wright, once the janitor's daughter, stood as proof that when opportunity calls, barriers dissolve, and the only limit is the size of one's own voice.